Welcome everyone to another weekly workshop with Ascending Tribe. This week we will be learning about German New Medicine, learning and healing our diseases. This week we have Leigh Marie, who will be taking us through this week's presentation. So Leigh, would you like to give a little introduction about yourself?
Yep, sure. So I'm Leigh Marie. I come across German New Medicine probably around about 4 or 5 years ago. Suffered quite badly with ill health, a lot of stomach issues, and I just sort of gravitated towards Louise Hay, who spoke quite deeply about emotions relating to disease, and then come across someone who I would probably class as my mentor, who introduced me to German New Medicine. So my journey has sort of been with German New Medicine along the way, and it's really helped my health anxiety. So I had really bad health anxiety at the time, and it sort of helped to open up that channel for me to be able to relax about any sort of symptoms that come across. Okay, so we're going to, the basis of German New Medicine is the 5 biological laws. So before I quickly go into the 5 biological laws, because these are the basis of German New Medicine, and I'm going to keep it quite basic because Dr. Harmer, who founded German New Medicine, was a medical doctor. He was an oncologist, and it goes very in depth about the biological process of the body, and can be quite deep and needs a lot of study. So I'm going to sort of break it down into the basic process of what German New Medicine is about, and then obviously if you want to delve deeper, we can delve deeper afterwards. So there's 5 biological laws of German New Medicine that Dr. Harmer put out. So just quickly, Dr. Harmer founded German New Medicine, and I feel like it's really important to say sort of how this come about, because it's not just it's backed up by scientific studies, CT scans. As I said, he was a medical doctor. He had a license. He was from Germany, and his son was accidentally shot, and he died. And I think it was about 2 years later, he got testicular cancer, Dr. Harmer, and he had always been of perfect health and realised that there must have been some sort of correlation between his son dying and him getting this. So testicular cancer actually is a severe loss, so that's sort of the conflict, but obviously at the time he didn't know this. So he was working at a university hospital in gynecology, and he started studying people that were coming through his doors that had similar cancers, and started working out their past and what had happened and if they'd had any situations. And it all turned out that every single cancer that people had were the same conflicts to other people that had the same cancer. So that's where his journey started, and it never stopped. He had his license taken off him, even though he was, presented it to lots of doctors. They all agreed with what he was saying, that it couldn't be denied, because he brought in a CT scans of people's brains that would correlate with the organ, and he could diagnose what cancer people had from their scan only, their brain scan. That's it. He could diagnose it down to the point. So they knew that what he was saying was right, but obviously the establishment didn't want people to know of this of what he's found, because it would have massively impacted the pharmaceutical companies and the medical system in general. So he had his license taken off him. He was put in prison, and I believe he sort of went around. I think he ended up in Spain. He was put in prison a few times, so he was, I think probably on the run, not on the run properly, but yeah, I don't think he could go back to Germany. He was, I think he was wanted over there. He did die 2 years ago, but that's his background on how he founded German New Medicine, and he's had thousands of studies, and I think he had a 90% success rate with curing cancer. So he was extremely clever man. So if we go on to the biological laws, then I can go through it. So the first biological law, so every significant biological special program, which he calls an SBS, originates from a DHS. So sorry about all the DH, all the letters. So that's a Dirk-Harmer syndrome. So Dirk-Harmer was his son, so he named it after his son. So this is a shock conflict. So in that moment of that said conflict, your psyche will be totally unprepared for this. So it's not something that you've expected, that you've prepared for. It is literally that moment of, you know, the shock. So it occurs simultaneously on 3 levels between the psyche, the brain, and the organ. So this is not a psychological issue, as I said, or an everyday stress. This is a moment in time where you were completely unprepared and could not anticipate what arises. So it catches you completely off guard and was unexpected. And I think this is a really important part to remember of German New Medicine, because a lot of people, like I say, I got into Louise Hay at the beginning. A lot of people will say, oh yeah, well, the lung relates to this or that relates to this, but this has been broken down on every individual organ and part of the body, every disease, every illness. He's broke it down into absolutely everything that can go sort of wrong, as we would call it, with the body. So it's important to remember that if you're under extreme stress, it can't cause an illness or a symptom, but you are obviously, if you're under stress, you're then more open to not receiving things as well as what you would if you were sort of, you know, in a higher vibration, so to speak. So it's important to remember that this is like a shock to the system. Should we go on to the next slide? So the second biological law, so every significant biological special program, SBS, runs in 2 phases. So provided there is a resolution. So obviously if we don't resolve the conflict, that conflict will carry on, and you won't get the healing symptoms until you've resolved it. So the conflict active phase, they call it the cold phase. And that is because in the conflict active phase, you are compulsively thinking about this situation that's happened. You'll feel sort of on high level anxiety. There'll be sleep disturbances. You're usually waking up around 3 a.m. And you won't feel a sense of calm. So that will be when you're in the conflict active phase. But the big telltale signs are the cold extremities, so the cold hands, the cold feet, and the shivers, and maybe not eating as well is another sort of indication that you are in the conflict active phase. And then we sort of move on to the healing phase. So once we've resolved this situation and we've connected, so we do this all subconsciously, but sometimes, you know, we need to seek help because we don't know where it is. But when we resolve these situations, that's when we sort of go into the healing phase. So this is when we would go to the doctors, right? This is when we would think that there was something wrong with us. We may have pain, inflammation, rash, fatigue, really high fever, and because of that fatigue, we would feel like there is something wrong with us. And you know, this is when we are encouraged to seek help. It's quite common for people to think that there's something wrong with them, and this is where it helped my anxieties when I discovered this, because I used to get into panic. Like, I had pain, I had a lot of cancer in my family, and I used to panic and think, oh my God, you know, I'm gonna die, you know. And my anxiety got to such a bad level that this literally just turned my life around, because it completely changed my whole outlook, realizing that now when I get pain, inflammation, headaches, I'm like, thank you, body, you know, thank you to my avatar for doing the job that it needs to do. And I tend to get through it quicker because I have an understanding that I'm not in danger. And I think when we panic, when we do get pain, inflammation, rashes, or whatever the symptoms may be, that then can cause more conflicts. And then you're sitting in a loop, and you're not resolving anything because you're in anxiety. You've got anxiety about the pain that you're getting. So the healing phase is the warm phase. This is, you know, when you're hot, when your appetite comes back, you know, when we would class you are ill. And as I was speaking to you the other day, Alex, we was talking about the healing crisis, the epileptoid crisis. And and this is where the headaches come on, and migraines. And this is because our body, so what happens is when we get the conflict, the psyche, so we get it to the psyche, which is where we feel it in our subconscious immediately, and then it correlates to the brain, and then the brain correlates to the part of the organ. So it'll be a certain part of the brain will match a certain part of the organ. That's when I was saying he could look at a brain scan and tell people what's wrong with their actual physical body from the scan. So when that correlates with the brain and then the body, when it's healing, we get inflammation. So we get edema, and it sits on the part of the brain. So that he says there's no such thing as a brain tumor. It's not a thing, because that's the edema that's in the brain that's used for healing. So it will go to the brain, and it will also go to the organ. And then when we're healing and that edema is being broken down, so the bacteria that we have in our body that we would use antibiotics for to get rid of the infection is what's being used to break down the inflammation that's took place. And the reason this inflammation takes place is to protect the organ while it's healing, and then to make it more stronger afterwards. So the bacteria comes in and it breaks down the edema breaks down, and that's when our headaches come, because obviously it's coming out of the head and it's breaking down, the fluids coming down. That's where the headaches come. And I know it's quite deliberate in having headaches. I had a migraine last week for 3 days, and it was hard to keep telling myself that no, it's just my body healing. But this is when we would go into panic. So it's really helped me to calm and keep calm when I get these symptoms, shall we call them. But temporarily, when we are in our healing phase, when we're in the height of healing, the epileptoid crisis, that is when we will go back into an active state of stress. So we will get our cold extremities back. We might have cold shivers, cold sweats. And then it could, then you'd think that there's, oh my God, there's something else wrong with me because now I'm getting this. But once that's gone, we then get into the process of the urinary process, which is where we start weeing, a lot. And if you think about how this works and how I've spoke about it, and when you do go into healing, you will notice that it goes in this direction. So then we will release the fluid out of our body. Once the urinary phase is finished, then that is the healing process over, and your body is back to how it should be at that time for that conflict, and unless of course you've got other conflicts going on. So do you want to go to the next slide, please? Okay, so the third biological law ties into the findings of the first 2 biological laws. So in the context of the evolution of the body, it illustrates the biological correlation between the psyche and the brain and the organ from an evolutionary point of view. So it's showing you that they all work together, as I was saying. It's the psyche, the brain, and the organ. They all work together as our body evolves. And the reason we have these things that come into place is because they are there to make the organ stronger, to make the body stronger. So next time it is prepared if that happens again. There was a question there. Shall I answer that? Let me just have a quick look. Yeah. What is an epileptoid crisis? It's actually what is well known as the healing crisis when we're healing. So this is when it is when it's quite intense. So you might have a lot of pain, headaches, fever, shaking, cold. So it's at the the top of the height of healing, but it is also the very end of the healing as well.
Did you need
go on to the next slide, please, Alex? Thank you. So the 4th biological law, this addresses the role of the microbes. So this shows that so-called infectious diseases occur exclusively in the 2nd phase of a biological special program, where the organism uses the microbes to optimize healing. During healing, microbes require a warm environment, hence the fever and inflammation in the healing process. So this is what I was saying before. So this is where people get a little bit stuck with German New Medicine, because we are in the belief that bacteria can be bad for our body. that we can catch things, cold, flu, you know, all the viruses that are about, but actually the bacteria and the viruses and then processes that are happening in the body, they're the microbes that are there to help with the healing process. So it can really throw people, and I understand, because I understand we've been pushed the germ theory for so long that it's a long-standing program running, and so I do understand why that can be quite hard to understand. But it is one of the main things of German New Medicine, is that we cannot catch anything. We can be poisoned, so you know there is poisoning. You can be poisoned from food, from poisons, from toxic gases, but you can never catch or be poisoned and get cancer. So you know, some people may say, well, if you eat too much of this, it will cause cancer, or you know, wireless can cause brain tumors. But in German New Medicine, he found that not to be true. So this is one that I find a lot of people struggle with getting their head around. Has anyone got any questions about that before I move on to the next slide? All right. So the fifth biological law is, so every so-called disease is part of a significant biological special program of nature, and it's created to assist humans and animals alike during unexpected stress. So humans and animals, we would all deal with these biological processes the same, and how he's linked up each disease and illness to the biological process. He's looked at it in terms of animals as well. So you can have, so an animal, for instance, would have a territorial fear conflict when maybe it was being chased, say it was a deer being chased by a lion, or you know, it would have that fear, but we would feel that fear in a completely different way. So obviously if we are being chased, then it would come under a territorial fear. However, it also ties in with being fearful of our life, being like scared in our home, thinking someone's broken into our home. So there's so many interpretations of how these can be presented. So I'll just give you an example because it's quite a common example. In terms of a cold, we would say in German New Medicine that this is a stink conflict. So for an animal, that could be that they have smelt a scent and it's a scent of fear. So it could be, you know, an animal that's coming to kill it. So that would be that scent conflict for them. For us, we can get a scent conflict from a smell that we might not like, but we can also get a conflict from this situation stinks. So, you know, that's why we call it a stink conflict. And a lot of people get colds under that premises of it being caught. And I know that's really hard sometimes to get your head around, but I can be around people all the time and not get cold. I could be with my daughter face to face. She could be snotting in my face, coughing in my face, and I won't catch it. I'm also a swimming teacher and I work quite close contact with children all the time, and I very rarely catch colds or coughs from people. And it's sort of ingrained into me now over the years by observing it, that we don't catch bugs, colds, flus, viruses, whatever else that we are supposed to catch. So it's a really interesting way and thing to study with regards to German New Medicine, because it can really open and expand our mind in terms of how we go forward with helping our body heal.
Someone actually has a question I just wanted to, before we move to the next slide.
Yeah.
Do people give cold sores to other people by sharing a drinking cup or kissing?
No. So it's a completely different conflict. So no, it's not. You can't catch them. You can't catch cold sores because they're a virus. is what they say. It's a virus and you catch them, but it's not. It's caused by a conflict. So you wouldn't necessarily, you could, if you say you kissed someone who had one and you was a bit repulsed by it and you was like, oh, I'm going to kiss that person, and when they kissed you, you thought that I'm going to catch that virus, I'm going to catch that cold sore because I kissed them, and it repulsed you because you want to be separated from it, and it wasn't very nice. So you then may possibly then get a cold sore because in that moment you were disgusted by that coming into contact with your lips, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I just want to quickly, I actually have a question. So do you think you could give us some examples of conflicts? Because I just want to make sure that everyone understands that these are like emotional conflicts that basically spark physical ailments within the body. Is that correct?
That's right. So let's go. I've shared the cold one. Let's go to the stomach. Okay, let's talk about the top part of the stomach. So in German New Medicine, it does matter whether you're right or left-handed. Sorry, I should have mentioned that earlier. So if you're right or left-handed, it's a really important part of it, because all depending on what side the conflict presents would mean all depending on where and whom that conflict involved. So if you was on the right-hand side and you was right-handed, this would be partner, or anyone you would class as a partner. So brother, sister, friend, boss, colleague, that would be the right-hand side if you was right-handed. If you was left-handed, then it would be mother or child, or someone you would think of as a mother. So, if your grandmother brought you up, she would be classed as the mother. So that's the left side, and that's if you're right-handed. And obviously it's the other way round if you was left-handed. So it's important to know whether you're right or left. Some people are right, think they're right-handed, but when they clap, like as if you're doing like a theatre clap, if you clap with your left hand on top, you're actually classed as left-handed. So some people completely right and do everything with their right hand, but they may actually be left-handed. Or if you was to take a step, what do you take a step with first, your right or your left foot? They're just ways to determine whether you're left or right. Also, if you are a menopausal woman, you may experience conflicts, because some conflicts are male and female dominated. So for instance, if we're going to talk about the upper part of the stomach and the gallbladder and this area, this would be a territorial anger conflict. But if you was a woman and you was right-handed, then it would be an identity conflict. So you would experience it in a different way. But if you was a menopausal woman, you would be classed as a male biologically, because you don't have the hormones available anymore. So you would take that on as a male conflict. So that would present with possible upper stomach issues. So nausea is a really popular one, bloatedness at the top part. And then if it was on the bottom part of the stomach, so the lower intestines, the colon, etc., that would then be an indigestible morsel, which tends to be, it could be something you've eaten and you felt like it didn't feel good when you ate it, and I think that was off. That could cause it, but usually it's down to an indigestible anger. So it's something that's happened to you in that moment that you couldn't digest. So I don't know, your partner's told you that he wants to split up with you, and it's Christmas Day, and you just can't possibly digest what he's just told you. It could present as an anger, and you would have diarrhea and the typical symptoms when you've resolved it. But obviously everybody's different, so some person might have that as an attack to them, or it might be a self-devaluation. So I'll name a few common ones. So we've got a self-devaluation conflict, which is anything to do with the muscles, bones, the lymphatics, anything to do with that part of the body. So any backaches, any neck pains, anything to do with your muscles and bones is all a self-devaluation, and all depending on what part of the body that self-devaluation is presenting itself. So if it was in your neck, it would be an intellectual self-devaluation. If it was the right-hand side of your neck and you was right-handed and your boss had said something to you that made you feel like you weren't very good at the job, you might then present with a neck ache on your right hand side. Or if it was on your left hand side and you was a mum and your child made you feel like a bad mum, and you felt like, oh, I've done something really bad, I shouldn't have done that, then that would present on your left hand side. So self-devaluate, that's why I'm saying with the left right is really important to know whether you're left or right, with regards to the devaluations. And then, so we've got self-evaluation. Then we've got a separation conflict, which is what we were just talking about as well with regards to the cold sore, is when we present with rashes. So, and this is just sort of a general rash, not something that's pussy or anything like that. This is just a spotty rash that's come up, which we would class usually as an allergy, but this is more to wanting to be separated from whatever it is that you wanted to be separated from at the time. So it does take a lot of digging about. It's not a simple and clean cut as it is sometimes, but a lot of it is quite, you've got to dig about for it, as we know anyway, like Alex, as we've been talking about it, we sometimes need to dig about. And if something's been lasting for years, then sometimes it can take a lot of investigation work to try and work out where it originally come from. So then we would probably look at tracks, so reminders, and we would look into sort of a weekly journal, daily journal, so to speak, and to work out what's been happening in your day, so we can try and pinpoint it down.
So someone here has said, would you say avatars, so I suppose our body, mimics each other and their conditions when in close proximity with one another? Like ladies close to each other getting this, getting periods at the same time, they're essentially syncing with one another.
I don't think in terms of symptoms that can happen. However, it's funny actually that someone's asked that, because I quite often get similar symptoms to my mum. So if my mum has like a headache or something, or a stomach ache, I feel like I can get almost sympathy pains, but I may not go through it like she does. And they're you know, taking aside the, you know, the biological process and the physical part of what German New Medicine's about, on a spiritual level, we are all interconnected, aren't we? And we could possibly face, I don't know if Dr. Harmer spoke about this, but we could possibly face a point of where we are taking on each other's pain. So for instance, when I do healing, not my G&M healing, but when I do my other healing, I can sometimes come away with that person's pain if I haven't protected myself before I've gone into my session. So almost like where you're empathetic and you're taking on that energy. So I wouldn't definitely not put that to one side and say, oh no, it's straight cut, you know, you can't. But I don't believe we could take on someone's symptoms as in a healing phase, maybe just more of a temporary part of it, you know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think we have to kind of change our perception around the pain and diseases that we go through, rather than them being illnesses, are actually healing processes. And I think that's changing your perception, your mindset around that, isn't it?
Yes, definitely. And it can really help. Like I say, I had really bad health anxiety to the point of where some days I was like crying. My doctor's notes, when I got them, when I finally decided I'd never go to the doctor again because they were actually making me more sick, my doctor's notes were massive, and I was reading through them and I was just like, they must have thought, oh, here she comes again. Like, you know, I constantly thought there was something wrong with me, and I was rattling. I was on that many prescription tablets. And I went to the hospital, and I was in hospital for a week, and they didn't know what's wrong with me. I had such bad stomach pains, where to the point of where they had to give me morphine because I was screaming in pain. Had all the scans, you know, on the stomach, and nothing sort of come up. And they were just stumped. And that wasn't just once, that was like 10 years beforehand, the same thing happened, and I was in hospital for a week, and they were stumped. They did not know what's wrong with me. So I was literally convinced they'd missed a stomach cancer and I was dying. So any pain or anything I got, I was like, oh, I'm dying, I've got a brain tumor. So to understand that when our body has them symptoms, and to like really just step into our body and just say thank you and just surrender to it, like rest. You know, if you need to take a headache tablet or you've got such bad pain, then take it, because it's not going to stop your healing. It might prolong it just slightly, but that you'll only go into more conflicts if you're sitting there screaming with a headache. Or so I do think it's important to be able to help yourself with healing and find things to heal. Protein is really good, Dr. Harmer said, with regards to healing the tissue, and that doesn't just mean meat, because obviously we can get protein from other sources, but it helps repair the tissue and it helps healing quicker, as does rest. You know, we all know that rest helps our body anyway, but it's important to sort of nurture our body when we have them symptoms. I say symptoms, when we have them healing symptoms, it's important to nurture our body, because when we nurture it, we will get through it quicker. There is a way of getting through your symptoms quicker, and that is by trying to connect to that moment of shock. So you're connecting into your psyche, into your subconscious, and you're connecting with that moment, and you're reliving it in your head, and you're like, okay, oh, that happened. And then you're thinking about where you was, you know, what was you eating? Because if you was eating something at that time of that conflict, when you eat that next time around, your body will see that as a threat. So it's important when you're resolving these conflicts that you're connecting with your environment and your surrounding at that time, because it can then cancel out any more tracks for it not to come up again. Because if we have a track, so I was saying about someone splitting up with someone on Christmas Day, and then Christmas Day comes around every year and you get a bad stomach because it reminds you, you've not connected in with the fact that, it's because Christmas Day reminds me of that time. Then it would become a track, and every Christmas you'd feel like you're allergic to Christmas, you know. It's like, Christmas, I'm getting a bellyache. So it just makes us more conscious and more aware, which is all part of our journey, you know, right? So it's all a part of our journey to become conscious and to be more conscious in our daily lives, because then it allows us to work out, you know, what our body's healing from. I mean, we don't need to work it out, but if it's becoming troublesome and it's a problem, then obviously you'd want to dig about and have a look to see where it's coming from. So yeah, so this is Dr. Harmer, or Dr. Hammer, however people want to say his name. He's a great guy. I was actually listening to one of his presentations last night, and just coming back through to him and just listening to his life story and what he's gone through, just to get the truth out, because he was determined. They told him that if he didn't retract what he was saying, they'd take his license off him, his medical license. And he said, I can't retract what I'm saying here. This is life-changing. I can't take it. And he did. He stood by his word until the day he died. And I'm sure there would have been lots more that he would have discovered had he still been alive, because he's updated German new medicine as the years have gone on, obviously, because he's founded more information for his studying. But there is a little quote on the next slide that he spoke about. I just got to move something to see it though, 2 seconds. So yeah, so Dr. Harmer says all so-called diseases have a special biological meaning. While we used to regard Mother Nature as fallible and had the audacity to believe that she constantly made mistakes and caused breakdowns, malignant, senseless, degenerative, cancerous growths, etc., we can now see, as the scales fall from our eyes, that it was our ignorance and pride that were and are the only foolishnesses in our cosmos. Blinded, we brought upon ourselves this senseless, soulless, and brutal medicine. Now, full of wonder, we can understand for the first time that nature is orderly and that every occurrence in nature is meaningful, even in the framework of the whole. Nothing in nature is meaningless, malignant, or diseased. And this is just such a brilliant quote from him, because it's crazy to think that cutting people open and poisoning their body is going to heal it in any way, shape or form. He does advocate that certain times we do need to have certain tissue removed, or if they're blocking the bowel, for instance. He, as a medical doctor, he would say that, you know, at times, as long as you're catching it at a certain time of the healing process, that it can help. But to just do it as a means to go ahead is just barbaric.
So we'd like to open up the floor for questions now with Leigh. So feel free to come off mute if you feel comfortable asking Leigh questions, or you can just use the chat box. I think that we had a couple of questions in the chat box.
Yeah, I'm just quickly having a look. So
yeah, do you think specific tones, sound frequencies have a healing effect on specific organs of the body?
Actually, Dr. Harmer made some music that and this was to help bring out the conflict in the conscious mind as well. I think you can find it on YouTube, or you can purchase it on his website, where he's got all of his scientific chart and everything that I work from. And yes, I do believe that frequencies, I mean, this is obviously a belief, it's no proof that I've got, but I definitely believe that certain frequencies and tones have a healing effect on the organs of the body, because they're putting your body back into balance, aren't they? So, you know, I listen to 5 to 8 when I go to bed, because it's a good DNA healing, and I think it helps me sort of activate DNA while I'm sleeping, and I always fall asleep to it. And if I don't, I tend to have a worse sleep. Now, that might just be coincidence, but, you know, I don't believe in coincidence anymore.
Do you know of any specific foods that have a healing effect on particular organs?
So all he mentions with regards to foods is protein being the priority in the healing phase, because it helps repair tissue. So that's, I mean, I obviously, eating foods of a high vibration makes us feel better. Eating, you know, genetically modified foods, it has an impact on us, on how we feel, doesn't it? So and then I think it could possibly be classed as a poison, right? Because we're putting unknown, untested, inorganic foods into our body. So that can't help us to heal, can it? It could poison our body as such. But he suggests, and he actually speaks quite highly of eating some form of protein in the healing phase. It's quite important. And also, when we've got the really bad headaches, we want to be careful not to drink too much water. And what we always told, drink loads of water when we've got a headache, because we're getting rid of fluids. We don't want to over put fluids into our body, but we still need to drink. Obviously, we need to keep the water flowing and for it to flow through, but we don't want to over drink when we've got a headache. I think that's quite important, and keep our head propped up so it can drain through the body quicker.
That really helped me, because I've just had a migraine this week, actually, so I took note of that. I know Khan's got a question. Khan, did you want to come off mute and ask Leigh a question? Khan, you're on mute, if you can hear.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, well, before I joined in, I did not know the scope of the presentation, but as well, you know, some of the guys might know, I went to a school of aerospace medicine, right? Space medicine. And when I was going to that school, I always felt like we were being trained as like retail managers rather than medical professionals. You know, I always had that, because before I went to that school, I had my share of time with drug dealers, right? And I know their tactics to make somebody come back, to keep the customer, right? So I saw the same thing in this medicine school, and I almost got kicked out for asking these questions, right? And I always believed in this territory rather than germs, and it felt wrong. And it actually makes me happy. I don't have a question, but I want to thank her for being an advocate of true medicine like this. And it really made me happy that this finally came out, and we can do away with this whole fake concept of medicine that we've been under for so long. You know what I mean?
That's amazing, yeah. And you knew within your soul that, you know, it doesn't feel right. See, and
it never felt right.
And I think a lot of doctors feel this way too. I mean, Dr. Harmer, he had a lot of advocates, but obviously they were told to keep their mouth shut because, you know, because it wasn't right. So I think a lot of doctors understand this deep down. I think I have faith. Maybe I have too much faith.
Anyone with a conscience can tell, you know, like, this is wrong. I mean, I mean, it depends on your level of awareness, but like when I'm exposed to something this wrong, like this massive scale, like almost evil, I got bells ringing in my ears, and I could not shake that feeling off the whole time I went to school there. I was like, this is wrong, man. Maybe I just chose a wrong career, But I mean, now that this is coming out and from out of Germany of all places, it really makes me happy. Seeing people like you being an advocate of this, it really makes me happy. Thank you. I want to thank you again.
Oh, thank you very much. I would definitely research into German New Medicine and Dr. Hammer. There's I'll put a link up if I can work out how to do it. There's an introduction to GNM, which is by a lady called Isadora Laker. So she was very close to Dr. Hammer. So she's following his work on, and she's following it on properly. She's not going off, and she's not taking his work for her own. And she does a free introduction on German New Medicine on her website, and then you can pay per so she breaks it all down and you can pay it per one afterwards. So that's how I've learned, and I've got his scientific chart, but it's very medical orientated. So for me, I get thrown quite a lot when I'm reading it, and I have to go and ask questions like, what does that mean? But I mean, if you've done that kind of you know a lot of the medical terms, then it might be worth you looking into his website and getting his
I definitely want to. Maybe I'll find my rightful place in the actual field of medicine, real medicine, natural medicine.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely.
And I won't feel guilty about it.
No, and I think this year, if anything, it's really brought out this terrain theory, isn't it? It's come out quite a lot.
Oh yeah.
I just want to say that I know that Anna wants to share a success story.
Brilliant.
Hello,
we can hear you.
Can you hear me? Hello. Thanks for having me on. I just wanted to share, like I said, my husband's success story. It was kind of a fluke, really. So basically, he had a chronic cough, and when I say chronic, he had this cough for about 5 years. And to the point where it drove me to distraction, because every time he was at home, it was just cough, cough, cough constantly. And so what I discovered by accident, speaking to probably the guy who's Leigh's mentor, he said that a cough is bear with me, I'm trying to remember the words. I think it's territorial fear of aggression, depending on what kind of cough it is. And his was quite a deep lung, like lower lung cough. And he said something would have had to have happened in that kind of scenario, like a fear of aggression, like on your territory. And when I worked back how long he'd had this cough, and I worked back something like major that could have happened that would have triggered this, I actually realized that when my daughter was about 9 months old, he was actually attacked. It was an attempted mugging with a knife outside our house by a gang of about 16s. And ever since then, that was basically what triggered it. And what really brought it home was the fact that he only coughed when he was at home. He said to me, I don't cough in the office. What is going on? He'd been for like, what those things are, the cameras that they put down the esophagus to see in the stomach, to see if there was acid and ulcers and all the rest of it. And there was nothing, like they couldn't pinpoint anything, the regular doctors. And when I put that to him, because that's all the gents said, do, just put that to him, say, do you remember when you were attacked, blah, blah, blah. And he stopped coughing like within days. I was flabbergasted, honestly. And yeah, 5 years of coughing, thank God it stopped. It was amazing. And since then I've done some simple things. Every time I get a cough now, I think back to what has triggered this, and I have found every single time is usually some kind of aggressive sort of territorial thing that has come. It's like one of my triggers, usually my brother, so I'm aware of it now. Leigh knows all the whole backstory there. But, you know, I'm aware of it now, and I don't, you know, I just try to be really conscious when I have these chats with my brother, and, you know, I figure it out before it's even started. But I've also solved the ones that did come along because I wasn't being aware of how I was feeling at the time, like this shock of, you know, of these conflicts basically that are happening between, you know, me and my brother usually, as I said. And yeah, but this one with my husband was the amazing thing. I mean, for 5 years, and then suddenly, like within a day or two, figured it out, spoke to him about it, gone. It was amazing.
That's incredible. So just acknowledging it resolved it.
Yeah, just even hearing about it and just him pondering it and thinking, oh gosh, yeah, because he hadn't really ever talked about it. He couldn't believe that had happened to him, which, yeah, who can really? But he just kind of tried to shut it out of his mind, and it didn't work doing that. He had to acknowledge it, think about it, and resolve it, basically.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. Honestly, it literally blows my mind all the time. I've resolved so many conflicts over the years that would have got me into a state of complete and utter panic. So I'm really grateful to have come across it. And I come across it probably in the same way that Anna did with my mentor is Richard Laker. And he was just talking about it in a comment, and someone was asking about health problems, like natural health website group on Facebook. And I was just like, oh, that sounds, I need to know more about this. And then over the times, I learned more and more. And then eventually I decided, right, I'm going for it. I'm going to study it. And I've got the scientific chart, and, you know, done a few online courses where they're already pre-recorded. It's basically just listening, but obviously it's helpful to have the chart. But it's just amazing, honestly. I did see someone had asked a question about cancer.
Yeah, that was what is the conflict of cancer, or does it depend on the location of the cancer?
So yeah, so it does depend on the location of the cancer. So there's no specific, you know, conflict, because it all depends what organ it is, what part it's related to, would then determine, you know, what part, what conflict it is. So liver cancer, for instance, is a starvation conflict, and that can come under, you know, we can see that under a lot of things. If you've been heavily dieting for years and sort of, you know, restricting stuff, that could be it. But it really all depends, because we can get cancer all over our body, right? So just the good thing to remember is that there is no brain tumor as such, because that is what he says is it's impossible for a brain tumor to appear without there being a correlating part in the body that's also linked up. So you would never just have he'd never just find that on the brain and not found something on the body if it was to be scanned. So he believed, and he, you know, with plenty of study, that there is no such thing as brain cancer. That really helped me, because I used to suffer with a lot of headaches, and you know, I thought I was dying of a brain tumor. So it was really good to know that, I think, with the headaches.
Been there. When my migraines were at their worst, like,
sorry, darling.
Oh, well, I was just saying, like, when my migraines were at their worst, I went to the doctor. I went to see a migraine specialist, and they did like the whole MRI scan on me, and I was convinced it must be a tumor, you know, because the pain feels like that, like it feels like there's something there, you know, with the migraines. But I was just saying I can relate to you on that.
Yeah, so that's like the fluid draining. So can you imagine the fluid being squeezed out, you know, being squeezed, like, you know, getting a flannel and squeezing the water, and that's the intense pain. I mean, migraines tend to sort of relate to certain conflicts, but you can still get them in other conflicts. But it's the fluid being squeezed, and that's literally what it feels like, doesn't it, in your head? So when you think about it, you can imagine, and also what part of the brain it's happening on will probably be part of the brain that is correlating to the organ. Now, I'm not I can't read CT scans, and as much as I've sort of looked into it on the scientific chart, I still get, you know, totally confused by what parts of the brain sort of it all links up to. So I'm no expert on GNM. I'm always learning, and I don't think that learning process will ever stop, because there's so many different conflicts in GNM that you know, I tend to just go with ones that people ask me about, and they're the ones I tend to know. If Katie, if you want to know specifically and what specific cancer, I can have a quick look if I don't know. So if you do want to ask that, is there any other questions?
There was one from Fundy. An ancient philosopher said that any doctor who isn't also an astrologer isn't really a doctor. Do you think being an astrologer is actually necessary?
Oh, interesting. That's an interesting one, isn't it? Because an astrologer would know about how the planets are moving. Is that why? I don't know if that's. Do you think
Fundy, you can come off mute if you
yeah,
want to.
that's thrown me a little bit. It's a really interesting question though, because I've not heard that
Hello.
quote.
Hi, Fundy.
Hi there. I don't know much detail about this. I've heard it from a few different people I listen to talk about this one famous quote by, I don't know whether it was like the father of medicine or just some random philosopher, but definitely in ancient times. And the way it was explained to me with just like maybe 2 or 3 examples was like blood will flow more, less viscously, you know, like more watery and less thick. And like if you're doing surgery, you're more likely to have the patient bleed out if, you know, say the stars or a certain time of year is in a specific spot. That would pretty much just be like a pretty good basic example. Of course, this doesn't really have to deal with surgery, what you're talking about. So, you know, I don't know how you feel about it.
So yeah, so basically, all depending on sort of where the planetary alignments are, would be how better your body could heal at the time. You know, like you say, it doesn't have to be surgery. It could be even a scab or a cut. That's interesting. I've got to look into that because that's really intrigued me. In fact, I've got to write that down.
I'll try to get it to you. Which philosopher said that?
Yeah, I've got to look at that. That's really interesting, and I'm totally open to certain times and certain days and certain parts of the year that you might heal quicker and better, and because obviously so in winter we tend to feel a bit more lower, and you know, so do our healings maybe take a little bit longer, or because we're resting more because it's winter, do we heal quicker, you know? So it's something
Right.
I've sort of tried to observe. In the summer we tend to feel good, we tend to get less sick, right? So
Absolutely.
we definitely feel lower in the winter, so therefore we are more opening ourselves up more to conflicts, so to speak.
I thought of another example I heard from the same person. He said, I forget which one it is, waxing or waning. I think waxing is when the moon is growing in light. If it is, he said, never cut your hair when the moon is waxing if you want it to grow. Always give yourself a haircut when the moon is also in a period of growth.
Wow. Interesting. I also heard from a philosopher about hair, about not cutting your hair, that they're antennae. So they got some when they went into America and they took slaves, they'd made them cut their hair because they're really good workmen and they're really good at what they did. So they made them cut their hair. They shaved their head off in the army, right? So they shaved their hair off, and they lost their powers, so to speak, and they were like, what's happened to these like strong men? Like they can't do what they could do before with their long hair. And it was believed that we shouldn't cut our hair too short because they act as antennae. So that is so interesting about cutting hair. I'm going to have to write that down now. Test that one out.
Funny,
when it's waxing, is it, or when it's waning?
Whenever it's growing. I think waning is, I don't know, those words always confuse me, which one is which, because I always think of both of them in a sort of like removing or shortening sort of way. Like waxing hair takes it away, so waxing would be taking away the light. But also waning is also a word for like I'm waning off drugs or something like that. So I forget. I need to come up with some sort of mnemonic device or rhyme or something to remember which one is which.
Yeah,
you had a
what-
question, didn't you?
What you're saying?
Waning is when it gets smaller. Okay.
I think so. That's my guess.
So we'll,
What you said about the antenna of the hair reminded me of uh, a scene in the movie Shanghai Noon with Owen Wilson and Jackie Chan. In that movie, Jackie Chan belongs to like the royal guard of some princess in some part of China, I believe, and he has a ponytail down his back, and someone says they're gonna cut it off, and he's like, I would be dishonored from the royal guard if I were to ever cut my hair or lose my ponytail. And of course, at the ending scene, he can only win his fight by someone has him by the ponytail, and he has to cut it off to loosen their grip on him. And he's so sad about it because he never wanted to. I just know that, yeah, in certain cultures, it's like either you never cut your hair or you always keep your hair at a certain length, and they would never dare trim their hair shortly. And I think that may be just a tradition to them, why they don't know even why they're following it anymore. But I'd love to see some tests perform on, like, I don't even know what there would be to measure, maybe magnetics or something. Like you said, if the hair is some sort of antenna, it'd be amazing if we could see the difference of some sort of force or field or energy in some sort of sensible way of someone with long hair versus short, or someone before or after a haircut.
yeah, I'd be interested to know as well, because a lot of tribals, they do keep their hair long, as you were saying. So there must be a reason, like, I know that they probably just follow it along anyway, but there must be some sort of reason why that sort of happens. I think we've lost Alex, actually.
Yeah, she told me on Discord that her laptop just cut out, but she'll be right back.
Oh, right, okay. I wondered where she went. Has anyone else got any other questions? That's so interesting. I'm going to look this hair thing up. I love learning new stuff. So astrology and the moon and the hair.
So that's why I'm not getting a reception up in here. Is that right?
Oh, right. So Anna's just posted a link about why human head hair and why it doesn't stop growing down there. We were just talking about hair. And I think someone mentioned up above, their name's down as iPad. I presume that's not their name. There has been a little bit of research done, although she doesn't know how credited. Rastafarianism have some beliefs on your hair being an antenna as well. So,
yeah, that's where I first heard of it as well.
Yeah, I found my other question in the chat. I wanted to ask you if you've ever heard of the old idea of the 4 humors of the body.
No, haven't heard of it. Tell me.
So, supposedly, the precursor to modern medicine was this era where, like, during what I guess people call like the bloodletting era, where there was this very popular idea of all illnesses in the body being due to an imbalance of 4 different types of bodily fluids. And so there would be like yellow fluid of the body, white fluid or clear fluid of the body, green fluid of the body, and black fluid of the body. And it's important to keep these in the right ratio to each other. Probably not all equal, but in balance in their respective amounts that they should be in. And that everyone today, when you're like watching a video discussing this idea, even as popular as it was, it's considered one of those like just like, what were they thinking, those idiots? But it was the height of medicine in a certain part of the world for a long time, and I have to assume it probably had the way of thinking about it and acting upon it probably had a few truths in it, if not the whole thing. It's considered a complete like mistake and just like an embarrassment to the history of medicine. But I've always wanted to learn more about how these people felt about they're called the 4 humors of the body, and the 4 humors needed to be balanced through, if something was wrong, they'd say, oh, you probably have a buildup of this kind of humor, in your body. So we need to drain it from your body, maybe by cutting a certain part of your body and draining blood from a specific area, or leeches or something like that. Well, yeah, it'd be interesting if you looked into it. I need to get around to it myself.
Yeah, I've just put it down as something to look into. Not heard of that though. It's quite interesting. It's really interesting as well that all around the world you've got Chinese medicine. Again, deals with things differently and splits the body up into certain parts with certain diseases. They also link emotions, which I think is what Louise Hay might have got a lot of her stuff from. But it's interesting to know that it's been there for hundreds of years. These faults and these processes of how the body works. If you think like 200-300 years ago, they say that cancer wasn't around, don't they? They say that it's fairly new. It was around, but it wasn't so prevalent, so it must be down to our environment. But I would definitely say that it's got to be down to early diagnostic tests. It's got to be down to that. Go to the doctor, get a scan. So the scan shows that you've got a tumor, or you've got inflammation in that area, but actually, as we know it from German new medicine, that's the body healing, but that's when it's picking it up. And when you can get like, they say, oh, the cancer just healed, we didn't do nothing, went back and they scanned and it was gone. And that's obviously where they'd resolved it. And luckily enough, they hadn't caused another conflict in the process of finding out about it. But the whole shock of finding out that you've got something wrong with you is then another unexpected shock, isn't it? And then it causes more problems. Another thing that I didn't mention is Dr. Harmer said that that you can that cancer can travel and it can go to other parts, so it's spread across the body, is not true. He said it's impossible for cells to travel across the body in that way biologically, and there's a reason why they say that it never that brain cancer can never travel. They say that brain cancer doesn't travel, does it? It doesn't spread, but it can spread upwards apparently, but it can never spread downwards. But he proved that to be completely wrong anyway. And a lot of people, so if they've got like a stomach cancer, they may get a secondary cancer, and it may be the liver, and that's because it's starvation, because they know that the stomach's going to cause them problems. They can't eat. It's blocking the colon or blocking the intestine or whatever. It would then cause a starvation cancer next to it, and that's why they say it's spread, but it's not spread. It's that another conflict's been caused. Similar, like if you get told that you're gonna die, and you've got no chance in life now, it can then spread from, say, your breast to your lung. But the lung is, the fear of death that's been put into you in that moment when you've said, oh, sorry, there's nothing we can do for you now. It's it's spread too far. So they cause secondary conflicts. It's not that they cause, or it spreads secondary cancers, so to speak. I think it blows my mind anyway. It's so good to know, because the fear of dying and the fear of dying of cancer, and when you come to that diagnosis and, oh, do I go the chemotherapy way, or do I just take it natural, and I do all these diets and all that, and sometimes they work for people and sometimes they don't. And same as cannabis, right? Sometimes cannabis can help people heal, they say, from cancer. I've got a theory that maybe cannabis is not healing them, but it's helping them eat and sleep. And that is my sort of that's what I feel that cannabis is doing, because it works for some and it doesn't work for others, which means that it's not the medicine that heals. It's more what it's helping the body do, which is relax and eat, which is what it needs to do to heal. So that's sort of my little thing about cannabis.
I like it. Are you familiar with the pH scale?
Yeah, kind of. I wouldn't say I'm totally familiar with it.
I've heard this word come up over and over again. I don't really know the etymology or the history or even what it truly means, but the pH scale is bordered on both sides by like acid and alkaline as adjectives, and we always think of acid as being a noun, like, oh, that's like a vial of acid or something. But I guess anything can be acidic, and then on the opposite scale, once it's past like 4 or whatever the middle number is of the pH scale, then it's considered alkaline. And I don't really know what the opposite of acidic would really be. You know, I know the name of it, alkaline, but I don't really know like what, like anything about it past that. But I keep on hearing over and over again this word used in the circles I run in. And one of the people who said this word about healing has said that like the body can really only heal itself when it's in an alkaline state. And if that's true, I wonder, like, what can someone do to like manually control the pH scale of their body? Like, I've heard one thing from a Quantum of Conscience video of him showing old clips from people who survived the Spanish flu. And they said, oh yeah, every morning my mom would make us swallow a spoonful of baking soda. And that would keep us alkaline throughout the day. And I'm convinced that's the reason I survived while all of my neighbors died.
I've heard this theory. So the alkaline, it's Dr. Sebi as well. Is he the guy that said about the body being alkaline for it to be able to heal, and that if it's acidic, then we're open up to disease?
He does advocate for alkaline diet as well.
Yeah, I presume that if your body's more sort of alkaline, you're in a more higher frequency. So then you're, you know, more likely to heal or less likely to suffer any conflicts, because you're more relaxed and more calm. I don't think that we can stop these things happening to us, but maybe our state of mind and our frequency will determine how we heal, you know, like, and whether we notice it and whether it's like a big conflict, because not every time we get a shock are we going to get a conflict. So, you know, like, because a lot of people go to me and say, oh well, like I'm always shocked at things. Does that? No, it doesn't mean you're going to be ill. It really is not everything that shocks you. But we do go through these conflicts, and we do go through these symptoms of the body on a spiritual sort of level. It's and I think Dr. Hammer's said it before, actually, is that this is our spiritual evolution, and this is a part of our soul's journey. So we go through these symptoms of the body because they're like a nudge to us to look at, you know, to be more conscious and to look at what's going on around us. And I do like to sort of link them up, and I started linking up these Ascension symptoms because, you know, a lot of people are talking about Ascension symptoms, you know, headaches, I'm getting these symptoms. Not everyone is getting the same symptom, but you can have like a group of people collectively getting the same symptom at the same time, for instance, like a migraine. So I'm wondering whether the ascension process and the sort of light and the plasma that's coming into the earth is allowing our subconscious to heal these conflicts that have been there in place, and collectively. So, you know, probably collectively we are healing an anger, you know, we're healing a fear of dying, you know, as a collective at the moment, especially this year, which would be why we're more syncing with our collective ascension symptoms. But there's definitely something there with this. We were talking about this the other day, Alex, wasn't we? That there's definitely got to be, I definitely agree that German New Medicines is not completely straight cut, and that the whole ascension process and the symptoms that you get from an ascension process is like a forced resolution of a conflict, so to speak, without consciously being aware of it, maybe.
Yeah. Is it to do with, like, just going back to the original thing about healing, like, you know, for example, with the things around my migraines is what I can just best put it to. It's about accepting, isn't it? Like how you were saying, like you don't get the healing symptoms with every single shock that you experience. Is that because you can accept? Is it about acceptance, basically? I guess I'm asking.
Yeah, so I think you subconsciously deal with things straight away, and you probably worked on it straight away. So, you know, like what Anna was saying, that she's now more conscious of things when they happen, that she can almost stop the whole process taking place. And I think on a subconscious level, we're dealing with it all the time. So like, for instance, children, they heal much quicker than adults. You know, they don't tend to be as sick for as long as an adult. And I think that's because on a level with their consciousness is that they just don't overthink things like us, whereas we stew on things. So something happens and it's really irked you, and then it's on your mind. It's like you've got that constant reminder going on and on and on, and you're not, so you have a shock and then you forget about it and you've moved on, and that's it, and it's the end of it. And you might have a quick healing, so you might have a little bit of a snotty nose for a day, and you've not really noticed it. But I think it's when it's something that's been so it all depends on how long the healing is, how long the conflict is how long the healing can be as well. So if it's quite an intense conflict that's gone on for years and you heal it, sometimes you have to be a little bit careful, because you could have quite extreme physical symptoms that you're not prepared for because it's gone on for so long. But no, you don't get you know, healing symptoms on every conflict, because on every shock, because we'd be ill all the time, wouldn't we?
Yeah, exactly.
Anna's just posted up for me, because I can't do it on the laptop. I've just sent it to her on the text. The G&M online seminars introduction.
Let me see if I can click on it.
So this is the link of how to learn more. Isadora is probably the best person to learn from, and like I say, she knows pretty much everything about G&M. But she does a free introduction, so it can just give people the knowledge that she needs, and she'll obviously go through a lot more to what I've gone through. And then she does paid for ones, which you would learn about specific parts. So you might choose common ailments or certain cancers or cancer of the body. Dr. Harmer calls it iron rule of cancer. That's what he calls it. So that's where he sort of discusses the whole process of how it works, and how it's a healing process. But it's a really good way to get an introduction. I mean, there is lots of people doing videos out there, but I think some of their work is not exact to Dr. Harmer's, whereas Isadora was his sort of right-hand woman, and so she's sort of what she's talking about has come straight from him, rather than sort of Chinese whispers along the way, and it's sort of come out. And I'm not, like I say, I'm no expert, but in terms of the basicness of German medicine and how I sort of put it into place in my therapy, it's really helped me, family members, and the people that I see. But if I was to get someone with quite an extensive case, or you know, of cancer, I would probably refer them to my mentor Richard, because Isadora is in Canada, whereas Richard's in the UK. So I would, you know, refer them to them, because
and what is the best way for people to get hold of you, Leigh?
On my Instagram, probably.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
but what is it?
It's evolve.your. Shall I put it on the chat actually? Evolve.your.soul.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you watch this back, I'll put it on the I'll include it on the YouTube description anyway.
Yeah, you can catch me on my website, which is evolvingsouls.co.uk as well. Both them usernames were taken on Instagram when I tried to get them, so so I had to improvise. But yeah, you can catch me on my YouTube or my website, Evolving Souls, as well. But I'm on Instagram mainly.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for your time, Leigh. That was really, really amazing and insightful. I'm sure we have to get you back for another session, because it's quite an extensive topic, isn't it?
It is very extensive and very in depth. That would take hours and hours and hours of studying, which I'm still doing anyway as we speak. So
amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, and we'll speak to you soon.
Thanks a lot, Ellie.
Thanks,
See you
everyone.
later. Bye.
Take care. Bye.